Good evening and welcome to this 8th day of April 2021, a not so different one from the previous year because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures. And need is the elephant in the room, loans and Kenya. For days now, IMF has been the talk of the street, but how many really understand it? IMF, or in full, the International Monetary Fund, is an organization of 190 countries working to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, reduce poverty around the world, among other things. But why have over 200,000 Kenyans signed a petition to protest a 2.34 USD billion shillings to billion 2.34 billion USD to Kenya? I won't answer that, but instead I'll ask your representatives. Tonight we host Nembale Member of Parliament Sako Bunyasi in Zoom, Ndiwa Member of Parliament Martin Owino, and Gloria Oroba, a youth policy expert and a familiar face to you. According to the 2021 budget policy statement, Kenya's public debt as of June 2020 stood at 7.06 trillion shillings, which is equivalent to 65% of the GDP. In December 2020, the Treasury claimed that the figure was 7.2 trillion shillings, which was 65.6% of the GDP. Is this too much debt? We'd want also to hear your thoughts on the ballooning debt rising in the country. We ask you tonight, should Kenya stop receiving international loans? Should Kenya stop receiving international loans? Speak to us and share your feedback through our SMS line 111 or on our social media handles at Switch TV or at Lincoln Ombogo. Remember to use the hashtag tipping points so that we could make this conversation as interactive as possible. My name is Lincoln Ombogo. Our sign language interpreters tonight are Michael Maithia and Teresia Washira. We also speak of the state of the nation and whatever is brewing in the kitchen ahead of the 2022 general elections. Remember that bromance in the city between President Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga, the One Kenya Alliance, and the seemingly silent Lone Ranger, Deputy President William Ruto. But first, we start with this funny bite from a Kenyan on loaning Kenya. Well, on our tonight, do you think Kenyans who are opposing the government's appetite of taking foreign debts are unpatriotic? Do you think Kenyans opposed the government taking foreign debts are unpatriotic? SMS us on 111 or Twitter at Switch TV Kenya and at Lincoln Ombogo. Let's take this first bite from this Kenyan.
Hello. Is that IMF office? Thank you. I'm calling from Kenya. Yeah. I heard that you gave Kenya money to save business which affected by coronavirus. And mine has been affected. I'm a manager of Piki Duthi. Oh no, you don't hear Kikuyu. I'm sorry. I'm saying I have a motorbike for boda and I have been affected. So what I want to is don't send my money to government. Please send my money direct to my phone. I will give you my number, please. M-Pesa, in Kenya we have M-Pesa. Can I give you number? Thank you. 0720 838 109, and then you put Kenyan code in M-Pesa. So, and remember to send for removal, removal, and I have my friends also, they want you to send direct to their phone. Yeah, they are saying, don't send to the government. Thank you, IMF. Yeah, do the, we are Mamuto Piki border Sako.
It seems funny, but that is the situation with most Kenyans. Actually, 200,000 Kenyans who have signed a petition. Now, do you think Kenyans who are opposed to the government's appetite of taking foreign debt are unpatriotic? Do you think Kenyans opposed to the government's appetite of taking foreign debts are unpatriotic? SMS us on 111 Twitter, Switch TV Kenya, and at Lincoln Ombogo. Now, Gloria, thank you for creating time. Martin, thank you for creating time. Of course, Bunyasi will be joining us a bit later on Zoom. Thank you for creating time as well. Now, I'll tell you the reasons why IMF approved the 255 billion shillings loan. Number one, support pandemic response. Number two, help reduce debt vulnerabilities. Number three, address weakness in state-owned enterprises. And number four, support anti-corruption framework. Are we overborrowing, Gloria?
You know, maybe we should ask ourselves why we are borrowing. You know, when you have I'm not an economist and I'm not an expert in GDP analysis and all those things, but I run a couple of businesses. And what I know is that when you run a business, the aim is for it to be profitable. So if we were actually looking at our country as a sort of resource, a business that we are running, the aim of it would be then it is profitable and that we are able to keep, you know, developing whichever other areas that are, you know, not developed and things like that. We borrow because we don't raise enough taxes to run this country. We borrow because we have a lot of state agencies that are actually, they should just be declared redundant. They are not really profit making, they're not cutting even. They're literally, it's almost as if, I would call it the health mafia. It's, we just want to keep employing people. We borrow also because we haven't really looked into areas of raising our taxes. There are a lot of industries, and I'm glad today we'll talk about some of them that have been tapped into, you know, like the weapons and stuff like that. There are a lot of industries. We're not thinking outside of the box on how we can raise our taxes. So in short, we borrow because we don't know how to run this country as a business. So at the end of the day, if we address those reasons why we borrow, we would not be talking about are we borrowing too much, because yes, definitely we are over borrowing. If you ask me, if an economist were to sit in studio and do for us some sort of calculation based on the income that we are raising in taxes and whichever other income that is coming through to the national budget, and we would ask them one simple question: when are we going to get out of debt as Kenyans? I believe he'll not have a clear answer.
Now, you've said that, you know, running a nation, compare it with running an enterprise. Do you think we are over borrowing?
What I think is we are actually not running anything. We're not running an enterprise. We are not running a business. We're not running an organization. We are simply being very mediocre with this whole affair of how we are budgeting for our expenses as a country, of how we are placing oversight. And I'm really glad we have elected leaders in studio, because the whole aspect of placing oversight on how these budgets are being allocated and being spent, we are horrible at it. And it's a fact that, yes, I like that clip, because the Kenyan was literally saying, because they understand that we've borrowed for the economic recovery, you know, for the pandemic. And that's why he's saying, mi pesa yangu msitumie huko kwa government, nitumie kwa sababu biashara yangu, it's me who's getting affected. Yes. Because that's what they understand, that we are getting 255 billion Kenya shillings for economic recovery because of the pandemic. So for him, it's like, if we're going for the economic recovery, hey, I am the business person that is actually directly affected. How come it's not trickling down to me as the business person? Thank you, Gloria. Yes.
Martin, do you think we're overborrowing? Now, we can actually analyze these four reasons why IMF approved the 255 billion shillings. Support pandemic response. We've been given money before to support pandemic response. Help reduce debt vulnerabilities. And address weakness in state-owned enterprises. Support anti-corruption framework. Do we need money, number one, let's start from the bottom up. Do we need money to help us support an anti-corruption framework? When the president himself, a few months ago, said that, you know, the country is losing 2 billion shillings a day.
When that guy was speaking, really, it hits me as an MP, because we are facing this every day. Poverty in households has shot up. People are not accessing health care because of lack of the power to do it. Even for the sake of the things are being borrowed for. In fact, it is the government which is indicted here. Why should you give pour milk to this weed which is not hollow? It will not reach me. So to your question, we don't need much money now. The government can run on two bases. One, you live within your means. At one point, Switzerland was in chaos, actually. But it did two things. One, you cut your expenditure and you raise a little tax to balance it. If you are a student of American history, President Truman in 1948, 47, and 51 balanced the books of the US. Cut the expenditure, live within your means, then raise a little tax. Now, here today in Kenya, and I'm ashamed as a legislator, because we did allow to push the limit to 9 trillion. And I said, we are giving a blank check here. Now, the Treasury can easily walk to a donor or to a bank and borrow. And then he tells the bank why he's borrowing, without the parliament, who does the oversight, having what he's going to borrow for. So we have become lamentators of what has been done. Right now, the reason why I'm joining these guys, we should not really borrow more money, because when you borrow money, even in your kitchen, you have to learn how to pay it back. Right now, out of 1 shilling, you pay 66 cents. That means you are remaining with 44 for your service. That's why the county governments cannot get the allocation. Now they are crying of 85 billion not remitted to them, because the money is not there. You cannot divide this 44 to all the things you need. You cannot bite what you cannot chew and swallow.
So, Martin, are you saying that all the 4 reasons given by Kenya and to IMF, and IMF has approved, that all of them, we don't actually need money for these 4 things?
Who would need money to put in Kenya way? How many have we put money there?
You know, it's funny that he had to reference a president outside, but in 2003, 2004, our very own Minister Muraria finally gave us the first balanced budget of this country. And it was very simple. Any projects that any ministry was going to come up with, they would put their nice fancy budgets and everything, but before it was approved, they had to fundraise. They had to ensure that they have scouted whoever, you know, and they fundraised for the projects before the projects are being approved. Basically, at the end of the day, you can only spend what you have. So, and you know, we might talk about a lot of things like, yes, we need the infrastructure, you know, you have to spend money to get money. But I think at the point where we are now, and for the reasons that have been stated there as to why we are borrowing this money, I mean, really, the third reason was that any state agencies that are actually not breaking even, we are borrowing money to help boost these agencies. And I think there's this concept called the lost cost fallacy. It's where when you buy something and you immediately realize this purchase was a complete waste of your money, so you have to, you know, but then because you spent so much of your money, you know, you keep thinking, but you know, I bought this car, as much as it has a lot of mechanical issues, let me just spend a little bit more of this to fix that, you know, and then another problem comes up and you think, but I've already spent this much money, let me just spend more. And what's happening with those kind of agencies is they're actually falling into the lost cost fallacy, because you keep pumping in money because you think that you've already spent so much money on that agency that you can't let it go. But if you ask me, there are a lot of state agencies that just need to be cut loose and, you know, completely abolished. There are a lot of agencies that are actually their mandate is a lot of gray areas. For instance, if you look at the tourism, Ministry of Tourism, you have the Tourism Fund as a state agency, and then you have the Kenya Tourism Board, and then you have the Kenya Association, I don't know. We have like 5 state agencies under the Ministry of Tourism, and their mandate is to actually just ensure that we boost tourism in this country. So at the end of the day, why can't you consolidate those agencies and cut loose, you know, all these expenses with the cars, with the security, with the buildings, a lot of things that we don't need.
Gloria, who is leading Kenya down this road? Is it the president and his executive, or Parliament as the oversight?
The only person who has complete autonomy, all the instruments of power to make all of this go away or to turn this around, is our president.
So he's the only person, the back stops with him?
He's the only person who can call for a meeting with all his cabinet secretaries, sit them down and tell them, listen, you have 2 weeks to go back to your ministries and cut loose any agencies, any projects that are actually, so, you know, as much, and I like what Mheshimiwa said, that he's ashamed because what they've been doing is a lot of oversight, meaning that people are now borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and only after they've spent is when the budgets come and this is what was borrowed and this is, and so they're doing an oversight over monies that have already been spent. But then, you know, the only person, as much as we are signing these petitions online, the only person who can stop this borrowing is the people and through the members of parliament.
You think the 200,000 signatures will stop the government from borrowing?
No, because that's what I'm saying. It's the only people who could have actually stopped this before it went anywhere are the members of parliament, because they are our representatives. They are the people. You know, when you say, according to our constitution, the sovereign will of the power of the people, the power lies in the people. The people are represented by the members of parliament. Unfortunately, our members of parliament, half of them, I have to say this, don't even know what's going on.
Bunyasi is on Zoom. Bunyasi, good evening. Many thanks for joining us. Thank you for creating time. Bunyasi, you are a parliamentarian and an economist. Do you think this country is over-borrowing? Bunyasi. Bunyasi, do you think this country is over-borrowing? I can't really hear you. Do you think the buck stops the president? Gloria says the buck stops with the president.
Not quite. That's why I said in the first place that as parliamentarians we are ashamed. And because of this, we will have to look into other laws, like the PMF Act, so that we don't give people, the executive, a blank check. For example, what they have said that they're borrowing the money for, if that had to come to us to approve, we would have not approved. Because the COVID-19 has been funded by World Bank, by the state, by the so many other people. In fact, we were telling it's coming to 1.2 billion. So you can't tell me that you are borrowing again for pandemic. And when you come to my constituency in Dewa, I still buy gloves. I still buy masks for my people. They don't feel it. That's what this guy was saying. You borrow and I don't feel what you are borrowing for. They are not cushions. You talk of the SMEs, they don't get any feeling. Now, the other reason which they are saying, oh, we are going to pump into state enterprises, and happen to know that Kenya Airways is one of them and the Kenya Power. This has been the center of corruption.
Martin, you and Bunyasi sit in parliament.
Yeah.
Why can't you call out the executive on this?
Parliament work in committees. I'm not in the budget and appropriation. I'm not in PIC. I'm not in PAC. But all this has to be redesigned. For example, PAC reacts for the results which has come from audit. Audit is done when the money have been used. So there's no proactivity in doing this stuff. We are taking an audit for ourselves, how we are going to relate with the executive in terms of oversight in financing. This is what I'm saying, and it will lead to changing some acts and PMF Act, for example, so that when we say the top you can borrow is 9 trillion, it does not give you a blank check just to walk to a bank and borrow. If you want to borrow, you have to detail up what are you borrowing for the parliament to approve. That clause is not there. We have become reactionary after we have approved the 9 trillion ceiling for the budget. So our hands are tied. And how do we pre-approve or pre-prove the corruption that is going to take place before the Auditor General audit the books? So we have to wait for the auditor. Okay, they borrowed. Did they use it well? If we find out the money is not used well, we recommend, like in the KEMSA case, the health committee, we went through and found the guilt and advised the DCIs and all those related agencies to charge them. Up to now, they have not been charged. And many people have not been charged.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that, Mr. Bureau. Hold that thought. We now take a short commercial break. The conversation continues shortly. Welcome back and thank you for watching Switch TV. This is Tipping Point. I'm Lincoln Mbogo. Our sign language interpreter is Michael Matthew. My guest tonight, Gloria Oroba, a youth policy expert, and Martin Owino, MP Ndiwa, and Sakwe Bunyasi, MP Funembale. The question we ask you tonight: do you think Kenyans who are opposing the government's appetite of taking foreign debts are unpatriotic? Do you think Kenyans opposing the government's appetite of taking foreign debt are unpatriotic? SMS us on 111 Switch TV Kenya on Twitter, and Link on Ombogo on Twitter. Now, Honorable Bunyasi on Zoom. Honorable Bunyasi, do you think Kenyans opposed to the government's appetite of taking foreign debt are unpatriotic, Bunyasi?
No, a short answer is that they are not necessarily unpatriotic. They may perhaps have been abusive, as it tends to happen, but they are not unpatriotic. It's a form of public participation. And I think over 200,000 is fairly representative of how Kenyans might be feeling. And I think that now it's time for the government to rethink. And although I think that they are getting angry at the wrong lender, I don't think IMF is the one to get angry with. I think there are others to get angry with. It's not IMF this time. As an economist, I know that the funding from IMF is needed by the Treasury to help them while they're using those funds, which are not that expensive. They can then stabilize close the loopholes. But this is an old problem. This part of it is about 8 years old. President Kibaki managed to add 1 trillion during his 10 years, and we have now added about easily 7 trillion. My numbers could be wrong slightly, in 8 years. That's a little high, maybe rather high. So I think there are many things. I don't know where we are in the show, but I could explain what I think is the genesis and what I think is the solution.
Bunyasi, Kenyans have not taken their anger onto IMF. If they meted their anger on their members of parliament or MCAs or their leaders, their leaders tell them that, it's the government. MPs say it's the government. The executive says it's the government. The government is an amorphous body. The question we're asking you, Bunyasi, is what does this mean for the economy in the next 5 years? So what does this mean for the Kenyan economy in the next 5 years?
I think first it shows that we are in a bad spot. That it's problematic now, but it's not impossible. There are economic tools in the management of the economy that will get us there. They are painful, they are not easy, because remember the fundamental problem is bringing our revenue capacity in line with our expenditure, call it appetite. You need to bring those close. There's always some borrowing. Borrowing is not a bad thing by itself, but you must borrow what you can pay. And there are tools to assess what it is you've borrowed and what it is you need to pay and when. Kenya government needs to step back and say, given where we are, how should we go forward? One way is to enter a program such as that's coming from the IMF, what we used to accuse as hostile conditionalities. In many ways, it's decisions governments ought to be making themselves, but they don't make those decisions. It's easier to say IMF has insisted. In a sense, it backs up those who might have wanted to get more austerity in the system, meaning to pursue less debt relative to the development activities that we have. And you can do that by delaying some activities, by ensuring that all high priority activities enter the pipeline. One of your colleagues, I think, had said that as I was hearing, so I don't want to repeat that. But we can't continue where we are. We are in a bad place right now.
Are you agreeing that, we are in a bad place and it's a bad idea taking the 255 billion shillings, Bunyasi?
No, I don't agree with that. I agree with taking the 255 because it's a means that will help the Treasury to stabilize and, for example, to pay off some of the commercial loans and remain only with longer term loans or loans that can be monitored closely. You are not going to waste an IMF shilling, I tell you. You can't let the money inside and then take it out the following day. They will know that. And remember, 255 will not come in one release. It's tightly controlled for each tranche as they monitor it. But having said that, we should not be waiting for the IMF to tell us what we should do. Our institutions have failed, and I want to start with the Parliament. Not in the same way as my colleague has said, but in the sense that we are the ones who approve the budgets each year. One of the ways in which funds are borrowed is when there is a big divergence between the expenditure levels and the ordinary revenue. Ordinary revenue is the taxation revenue that we get. And we approve those budgets every year. They are measured in the simple terms, which are they call the budget deficit. And yes, some deficit is allowed, but that you reach a point at which, like he had said correctly, my colleague, I think said that for every shilling that you collect in ordinary taxes, I think 62, 65, two-thirds is now destined for debt. When you reach there, then you have to say, how do you slow down the debt absorption? And I think those are the hard questions they need to do. And Parliament must rise up to the occasion and support the president, not by agreeing necessarily with the executive, but by checking what they are saying and saying this is in line with sound economic management. This is not. I think being nice to your political party and seeking to get continuous convergence at all points is what's leading us here. Our oversight has been slackened.
I see. Oversight is a bit shaky.
You know, I'm very...
Oversight is a bit shaky.
It's not about the oversight, if you ask me. It's actually funny because I hear Mheshimiwa talking about we must support the president, parliament has failed. Who is parliament? I wish people would own it. I wish the members of parliament...
Are those double
I wish
standards?
he
Are you
would
saying,
say
Mheshimiwa,
that I have failed my people. Because parliament is not a building.
Are you saying
National
Mheshimiwa,
Assembly are the people who elect.
Mheshimiwa has double standards?
This is what I'm
when it comes to
saying.
this?
Members of parliament have got three roles. Oversight to institutions, legislate on behalf of the people, and to represent the people. When we look at oversight in institutions, that's more of reactionary. That's actually what they've been doing. The budgets have been spent, we've gone in, we've seen KEMSA, there has been this and that, then they remove. But then when you go to legislating on behalf of the people, how come I hear a lot of parliamentarians, members of parliament, complaining that, you know, we don't really have a chance to approve certain things or certain debts before they are taken? This has been ongoing for as long as they have been in office. Meaning, if actually they understood their roles, by now we could have been talking about somebody, a member of parliament, who actually tried to front a bill that would sort of take this under control. You understand what I mean? So at the end of the day, you know, we can't be sitting as Kenyans and saying government has failed. Well, we can, because we are not elected, but we can't be sitting as members of parliament saying, you know, parliament has failed. Parliament is not a building. I wish that Mheshimiwa would say that I have failed my people.
Do you think parliament has been hijacked by the executive?
What I think is that, unfortunately, we have a lot of representatives of these people, these members of parliament. We have a lot of MPs who are not necessarily aware of what their roles are, who are not necessarily aware that actually, if you realize that I have no influence because I don't sit in a parliamentary committee of finance or whatever, if you realize that you, as a member of parliament who's elected, cannot exercise your three duties because of a loophole that is there legally, what are you doing about it? Why are you not sitting together with people, legal heads who can help you draft a bill and do something to change that status quo? So at the end of the day, it is unfortunate that these same MPs are coming to join us Kenyans, active Kenyans on Twitter, to lament about themselves. And yet all they have to say is, listen, I'm a member of parliament. This much responsibility I will take. I'm glad that Mheshimiwa in studio has actually said he's feeling very disappointed about, you know, his role in it. And I would like to hear more MPs saying, actually, we failed. It is us who were busy with BBI and all these other things. When we lifted our heads like this, they have already borrowed 255 billion. And we don't know how that happened. And it happened so fast. I wish they would say, listen, let us now go to parliament and say, we had a committee of 5 economic or bankers, I can't remember. You remember the committee of the 5, the one that had a worry, there's this committee that was made for COVID, that was actually appointed by the president, and it was supposed to have oversight on all the COVID funds that we received as a country. How come nobody's talking about that committee? And how come nobody is asking them, hey guys, now we are borrowing 255 billion to go on economic recovery, but you guys received, I don't know, 1 point something trillion. What did you do with this money? How come these members of parliament, if they are saying that maybe they slept kidogo, wakaamka tukachukuliwa loan, why are they not doing anything now? They can't join us to be signing petitions online.
Gloria,
they are elected.
Do you think
they have influence?
Do you think that parliamentarians have been hijacked by the executive?
I think that most of the parliamentarians that we have in this National Assembly, 1, are lazy, 2 are uneducated, 3, yes, some of them have been hijacked, and they absolutely are just closing their eyes, you know, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. And that's why we've ended up in a place where The only thing we can do as Kenyans out here is make noise on social media and sign online petitions. Because the people who we elected to represent us...
Do you think those online petitions will move anything? Will change anything?
Absolutely not. Absolutely. Oh. This is like asking if Peter Kenneth is the president. He didn't win on Twitter.
Thank you, Gloria. Parliamentarians, I'm glad you're here, and Bunyasi is here as well.
Yeah.
Have you been hijacked by the executive?
You know, Parliament is...
On your oversight role especially?
No, Parliament is an institution, and there's a way we do our business. At the end of the game, the majority have their say, their way, and the minority have their say. So it may not come to what Gloria is saying, some are illiterate and all that. But if you are cooking ugali and the steak is small, you may need a bigger one. What I would say in all this, borrowing itself per se is not bad. But what do you do with what you borrow? This is why I say that I feel ashamed if my constituent can take a phone and call a role which I ought to have played as an MP. So it means there's something wrong there. Now, we have to look for our tools for doing oversight. I said, and I think Bunyasi also repeated, we did increase the ceiling to 9 trillion. But when these people go to the bank, we were not privy to what they were going to borrow for.
Who are those people?
This is the executive now. If you talk of government, we have three-legged stool here. The legislators, the executive, and the judiciary.
So this blame now goes to the executive.
So this is the treasury, which falls squarely in the executive. Now, all this, I said, if it had to come to, especially I'm in health committee, if we were to approve additional money for COVID, and we have not even given how the previous money have been used, I would have said no. If you were to take more money to state enterprises in the name of jolting them and restarting them, you would say, sell them. Government does not do business. You just provide conducive environment for doing business. In fact, most of these parastatals should be privatized. That is what we said. Now, these things would have not passed through many people in Parliament and say, yes, go and borrow for that. There's another animal here called restructuring. Very expensive affair, so that you are not vulnerable to borrowing more money. First of all, if you don't want to borrow money, start with physical discipline. What can you do with what you have? It's not much at break and big and people are going hungry. Now we have a lot of money, donor drugs for ARVs lying at the port. They need taxes, they need what? Government cannot react to them. You have to restructure yourself first in the budget making so that you don't end up with budget deficit. See where we go wrong. Once, like now we are on the trajectory of almost $1 trillion per every fiscal year. You need $1 trillion to bridge it up. That's why I said when Truman was president in 47, 48, and 51, they did two things, which we should do. First, cut the expenditure. Live within your means. Then raise a little taxes so you can balance your books.
Bunyasi wants to support you. Honorable Bunyasi, you agree? You have agreed that it's okay to take the 255 billion shillings loan. But do you agree for us to take that 255 billion shillings loan for these reasons? Support anti-corruption framework. Address weakness in state-owned enterprises. Help reduce debt vulnerabilities. And support pandemic response. Honorable Bunyasi, looking at those four reasons why the IMF approved the 255 billion shillings, do you agree that we need that money for those 4 reasons?
No, I think there is a lot more to it. The bottom line is that the state must reduce its expenditure. Some of the expenditure goes into parastatals. It's also that the state has to increase its revenue. And the bottom line is that you, as a trained economist, contrary to what your colleague thinks, there are some very good people in Parliament who are really very good, actually. in all fields. The bottom line is that you're seeking, as a manager of the economy, to bring your revenues in balance, close to balance. It doesn't necessarily have to balance, and there are reasons why that's not necessarily desirable in an economy like ours, but as close as possible. One and two, that the pipeline of activities you're funding in your budget have actually been checked and verified, that they are of a high return, that are of high impact to the economy, and that the resources as approved will be used as approved, rather than, for example, wasted, stolen, or any other means. But let me just respond to something that the lady has been harping at. It's not out of ignorance that we have these problems. No, it's out of willful decisions that are not in the right direction. And what are we doing about it? I have a comprehensive bill on public debt management. So that is on the floor of the House. It's very comprehensive. It's also available in the public arena. She can probably access it from the parliamentary portal, or maybe I can even arrange and send it to the studio after the show. It's not that they're doing nothing, that the parliament is doing nothing about it. There are things being done. And also, if we have to have an impact, let us not do finger pointing. That won't help. Certainly, it's not going to be helpful. As economic managers, like in public health, like in other areas, you ask yourself, given that we're where we are, how do we get out? That's what we should focus on, remedial measures. And part of the remedial measures include the kinds of discussions the government has done with IMF. It's unfortunate we got there. I say unfortunate because IMF are surgeons, they are not physicians. IMF, you go there when you have to cut a limb, when you have major surgery, not get a pill. The pills you get those from the World Bank and from the others, which are long-term. So you don't complain after you've gone there. We knew we were headed there, but somehow we didn't stop ourselves from getting there. Now we are there. We have to make a turnaround. And if we don't agree...
Are these loans going to lead to excess taxation to Kenyans, over-taxation to Kenyans, more taxation to Kenyans?
The requirements, a fairly standard requirement of the IMF is that you have to bring your revenues up because you have to pay your way. Now you're doing it clipper. If you have a budget, you should finance your own budget. But we can't always do that. That's why we borrow. That when you borrow, you must minimize what you borrow. So you borrow only what is essential. Two, for purposes that will grow back the economy. So what happens is that when IMF gets into town, they're going to say, you must increase cost recovery. You can increase cost recovery for public services by increasing the cost sharing in favor of higher proportions, increasing proportions on the consumer. But you can also do that by broadening or deepening the tax base. It doesn't matter how you do it. I was very pleased recently, I think a month ago or 2 months ago, when there was a major outcry at the level of taxation. Tax rebellion is a common way in which citizens tell the government it's now too much. And what can government do? Government can have a number of measures that are normally very painful. Those measures is part of what they have discussed with the IMF that are coming out. What we now should be doing is that we should be intolerant to wastage, to theft, and to unnecessary taxes, and to have programs that are not costed and agreed, so that if you have a program...
I want to ask you a personal question, Bunyasi. I want to ask you a personal question. I mean, leave alone your party and your membership, and because your party leader supported 255 billion shillings being borrowed. Are you happy?
No, I'm an economist. I have a PhD in economics.
Are you happy with where this country is headed?
That is fair.
Are you happy with where this country is headed, Bunyasi?
Am I happy that?
Where this country is headed? Are we taking this country down the drain?
That's why I brought a bill before Parliament. That's why I have a big bill before Parliament. I am not.
Can I just address something? Please. I'm glad that actually there is an active member of Parliament doing something and drafting bills and trying to carry out their duties. There's a very important thing that we're missing out here. In order for us to change the things that are wrong, we have to first recognize them and we have to own them. There's this game that is going on. It's not us, it's the executive. It's not the executive, it's the National Assembly. It's not the National Assembly, it's the people. And, no one wants to own it. And that's the reason why I was very strong on saying we cannot have members of Parliament coming to complain with us on Twitter. Take, for instance, the first thing that we can do to save this country 18 billion Kenya shillings annually is we need to restructure 127 loss-making agencies, state agencies. And, just to give figures so that you don't see like it's we are talking out of wherever. Kenya Power made a loss of 3 billion. 3 billion in their last financials. East African Portland Cement 2.74 billion. You have KBC, Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, 9.8 billion. Zoya Sugar, 3.4 billion. So, and that's just from the outside looking in. You can imagine if now you have some of these appointed ministers and whoever who are sitting on state agencies that are literally just bleeding us dry out of our monies. Let us look, first of all, take ownership that yes, as members of parliament, you know, they have failed us. And if indeed they realize that their role on legislating and changing and being and holding those agencies and the executive accountable was being interfered with because of a legal loophole, they've been there. Now we are coming to the next general election. So they've been there for how long? How many years have you realized that you're unable to conduct your work? So I'm glad to hear that there's actually a bill that Mheshimiwa has sponsored. But then let us be very, very practical about this. Kenyans have been failed by the executive, Kenyans have been failed by the National Assembly, and Kenyans themselves have failed them. We have failed ourselves. Because I like the idea that I've just heard from him. Instead of going online and signing all these petitions, we can also just stop paying taxes.
Paying taxes.
Just stop paying taxes.
Stop paying taxes.
You know, it's a form of saying we are tired of you know, all of these things that are happening, and our economy, as far as we can see, for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, up to 60, we are going to be in debt.
Stop paying taxes.
So stop paying taxes.
Martin Gloria is saying stop paying taxes. With the pandemic and its effects, Kenyans have been forced to stop paying taxes. Most of them have been rendered jobless. Many companies have shut down.
Right.
Are we going to sustain this debt?
That's my worry, because right now the revenue, which is also at the tail end of this loan, is not going to be paid. Because nobody...
final thoughts. You say your final thoughts.
Yeah. If you come to my constituency, the poverty in each household, the joblessness, people who have just migrated from Nairobi to rural areas because they cannot pay rent here. So that kind of power to pay back to the Uncle Sam or the government is not there. So whether they come up and say we are not paying, they are saying in silence that we can't pay because there's no job to pay. But what I disagree with IMF and those who went to the bank, this division that gave us money is called poverty reduction and growth. That 255 billion will not realize that. Nobody will trace where it has gone to. So as we may blame the executive, the parliament, there's a culture of Kenyans that should come on the table. Why don't we become serious if you are given a position?
Kenyans need to become serious.
Yeah, and we have to change our culture. We have to be I said, I use the traditional riddle. You have to be a through hole, that if milk is poured from one end, it can go through to the other end.
Okay. Government, on our quote of the day. The government is instituted for the common good, for the protection, safety, prosperity, and happiness of the people, and not for the profit, honor, or private interest of any one man, family, or class of men. By John Adams. Well, all the views expressed in this show do not portray the views of Switch TV, but our individual views. Many thanks for watching. The conversation continues next Thursday. Good evening.